And in 3, 2, 1, welcome also to those of you on YouTube. Welcome. We're now live on both YouTube and Facebook. And this week we're talking about Parashath B'reishith. It's a new beginning. And that's sort of something that is always impactful to me. New beginnings, the cyclical nature of the seasons and of how we study Torah and of how we're supposed to read the Torah is actually built into the very fabric of creation. What do I mean? God culminates the creation with the Sabbath day. And as I described in a few years ago, the Sabbath day was basically incomplete until the Jewish people accepted the Torah at Sinai, because the Sabbath marks the end of creation, God's conclusion. He rests, so to speak, although it's very difficult to say what that exactly means. But then, before there was a people that accepted the Torah, the Sabbath didn't exist as a concept. As I pointed out, that's why others of Eisenstein, 100 years ago or so, noted within the opinion of Maimonides that when we say a Gentile should not keep the Sabbath, or that one who does so is liable to the death penalty, that must be a rabbinic enactment. He says it's probably one in response to the Christian movement to create their own Sabbath day in the 2nd century, sometime after the destruction of the temple. And one of the major proofs to this position is that before there were Jewish people keeping the Sabbath, how could you have said that a Gentile would be liable for doing so? They didn't have such a concept. Before the Jewish people became a people at Sinai, there weren't even commandments. There was only the 7 Noahide commandments, and keeping the Sabbath or not keeping the Sabbath is not one of those. There's actually a few, aside from the 7 that are all agreed upon, there are a few suggestions in the Talmud that for additional prohibitions on the entire world, including Gentiles, like crossbreeding species of plants and animals. This is not unanimous. Why? Because if it were so that there would be such an obligation, then it should be 8 mitzvahs or 9. There are some who claim that Gentiles should not learn Torah. Once again, that seems to be a rabbinic enactment, and that's why it's not one of the big 7. And that would be related to the early Christian movement, where they created their own scriptures. It used to be, if the heathens didn't want to keep the Torah, they were just idolaters and pagans and whatnot. But starting in the Christian era, there was actually a specifically non-Jewish movement to adopt the Torah, or at least adopt an idea of scripture and Torah study. And it's in reaction to this that the sages enacted that Gentiles should not study Torah. So those two we could understand, but the ones against crossbreeding, for example, or against castration, that's another one, even of animals, that those are questionable, because even though they are in the Talmud, they're disputed in the Talmud itself, because they would have to be on the list, and then we'd have 9 prohibitions. Now, the Sabbath day, when we say Kiddush, actually is alluded to. We say it's when God created the world, and then it's actually in memorial to the Exodus, in memorial of the Exodus. That's only, it was given to the Jewish people, and they're told to remember that they were slaves in Egypt, and they were taken out of Egypt, and they used to have to work all the time, and this is a part of their covenant. So what is a Sabbath? Is it a memorial to the Exodus, or is it a memorial to the creation of the universe? And the answer is, it's both. It basically was left in its potential form for a few millennia, the centuries before there was a Jewish people. And it was only when the Jewish people became a people that we actually have the conceptual Sabbath become something that actually exists in history and in practice. And the Sabbath day is the day where the sages, and their wisdom, this is already dating back to around the time the Torah was given, already determined that the Torah itself has to be read publicly on a regular basis, and that the main readings, the cyclical readings thereof, that is, we're going to read a major section of the Torah for the community, and by doing so, we'll hope to eventually read through the entire Torah, as opposed to, let's say, the readings of special occasions, which are taken from not random places, but from disparate places throughout the Torah. If you're reading about Pesach, so you read on Pesach about Pesach, and on a different holiday about what goes on that holiday. If you were to do so only, then you would not finish the Torah in any meaningful way. You'd only read specific passages at times a year. The cyclical reading allows us to cover the entire Torah on an even basis in a way that gives respect, proper time for each passage to be properly analyzed and understood. So the creation of the world already has this idea that there will be a cyclical nature to how the world is run. It says on the fourth day, God created the luminaries. He created the heavens, and the heavens were created earlier. He created that which is in the heavens, and the purpose of that is to keep track of basically time. And the Sabbath itself cannot correspond to any physical phenomena in the heavens. There is no star, there is no orbit of any sort that actually has a periodicity of 7 days, of which we know and of which we can keep track of just by viewing. But there is this nature that we are supposed to keep track of when the Sabbath is. Even a person who's lost in the desert doesn't know what day it is. He's lost track of time, so he has to somehow establish for himself his own personal Sabbath day to keep a Sabbath, even if it's probably not the day when the rest of the world is keeping Sabbath. The cyclical nature of the universe is such that God wants us to keep track of things, and on the special day that He has designated for rest, we are supposed to review the Torah in a cyclical nature. This is what our sages realized long ago. This is what we celebrate now in Simchat Torah, and this is something that every time the Sabbath rolls around, we should consider. The Sabbath day is holy to us because we were created to keep the mitzvot, the commandments. We were chosen by God so that the Sabbath can actually become something worldly, of this world. Before, although the Midrash says that there are actually some physical phenomena that indicate the Sabbath day, the legendary Sambation or Sabation River, which is likely a metaphor for something, by the way, rests, so to speak, on the Sabbath. If there is no such river known to man that actually does that today, despite what people may be told, which is why I'm making the very important claim that it's a metaphor for something. It's not understood by most people what it's talking about. There is no physical phenomena that indicates a Sabbath day. It is up to us to sanctify the Sabbath and make it the Sabbath day. And we do so by, of course, abstaining from forbidden work and by enjoying ourselves, and most importantly, dedicating that day to Torah study. The sages say that the Torah itself asked God what is to become of it, and He indicated that the Sabbath day, its mate, so to speak, is the Jewish people studying the Torah thereon. I hope that the cyclical nature of the seasons will impress upon us the importance of sanctifying the times, of taking advantage of every season as it comes. I also like to take the time to express my own appreciation for the fact that the rainy season has already started very much on schedule. It's rained a few times already here in the land of Israel and more on the way. We should thank God therefore, and we should continue praying that He allow us to continue meriting to see the rains in their proper time. Now, this idea of a holiday in potential or a holy day in potential only be realized is actually a running theme throughout the Torah. This past holiday, we did not have a live streaming, so I'll give it to you the basic idea. Every Jewish holiday is supposed to mark something in history. It is also described by our sages in a midrashic sense that certain days have a sigula, certain holiness to them, certain energy, that day is meant to be something. So let's begin with the beginning. Passover is described by our sages as the time, then specifically on the first night of Passover, is the time when big things have happened in history, because that's when they're supposed to happen. So Sodom and Gomorrah were overturned the night of Passover. The sages actually derived that from the fact that, for whatever reason, it's included that Lot made matzot to serve his angelic visitors that night. Well, I would include this detail because this is trying to tell us, even though if Lot not consciously was trying to serve them unleavened bread because it's Passover, and he was probably not aware that this is going to be the day when the Jews are going to depart Egypt and have trouble making their provisions in a timely manner. It's that it may have just been a coincidence, but this is noted because this is a day that is marked. And there's actually a piyut, which is now part of the Haggadah. Vayhi b'chatzi halayla tells that all these things that happened that day in history, the downfall of the Assyrian army during the first siege of Jerusalem also happened the night of Passover. Just as an example, it says that it was a Leil Shiurim, a night designated for these events, and that's the specialness of Passover. The idea, the conceptual power of the day of Passover existed well before Passover became a historical reality. And we could say that also about, for example, Hanukkah, where the sages point out that the 25th of Kislev dates to also that first year when the Israelites left Egypt. That's the day they had completed their preparations for the building of the tabernacle, and that day was sort of set aside for only a little bit more than 1,000 years, well, roughly, yeah, or even more, 1,300 years or so, until the Maccabean rebellion and the reestablishment of the temple service on that day, the 25th of Kislev. Moving ahead, if you look in Exodus, in the Parashath B'reishith, where Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron are told about the upcoming Exodus, they're told what to do in order to prepare for the Exodus. God tells them, in the future, you will mark this day as a holiday. And he says, it's 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. The first day is a Mikra Kodesh, what we would call Yom Tov. Now, that's the day that's more holiday. It's not Chol Moed. And so is the seventh day. So the people could have said, yes, okay, so this first day will mark the day of the Exodus. It's the 15th of the first month, and that will be the day where we keep as a major holiday. But what's so special 6 days later? What is going to happen on the 21st of Nisan? They could have asked this. They said, we understand this Chol Moed, so there's a time after the first Yom Tov where it's less of a holiday. It's Chol Moed himself is a contradiction in terms. Is it Chol or is it Moed? The answer is it's both. Why couldn't they ask, Moses, what is to be happening 6 days after the Exodus? And in reality, we know now that that is the day when the sea was split, when they were rescued finally from the clutches of Pharaoh and his armies. So this day already existed. Even the seventh day of Passover was foreshadowed. It's going to become a holiday. But even when the Exodus happened, this seventh day only became, its potential was only realized once the Exodus happened and once they had gotten to the sea. So too with Pentecost, the day of the giving of the Torah, only became something once the Torah was given, the day that they got the Torah. And that day, as it describes in Parashat Mishpatim, they were already told about a future holiday, the holiday in the fall, Sukkot, which would be the 15th of the seventh month. The seventh month was once upon a time called Ethanim, and eventually became, they adopted the Persian name Tishrei, or the Babylonian name, sorry. This seventh month holiday, also, they were already told about it as the festival of the ingathering, Chag HaAsif. They're told about this when they received the Torah. But as the Vilna Gaon points out, it only became a holiday when they sinned with the golden calf, and the clouds of glory returned to encompass the camp. So once again, Sukkot itself existed for quite a while, approximately 4 months before it was actually realized in potential. Same thing with Yom Kippur. They had received Yom Kippur as a holiday, the 10th of the seventh month, and it only became a day with its potential, historical potential realized when Moses came back down from the mountain after being there for another 40 days and achieving complete forgiveness on their behalf. Rosh Hashanah is the one day that basically had no time of this historical limbo. Rosh Hashanah is the day when man was created, and forevermore, that was designated as the day when all living beings go before Him Almighty and are judged for the coming year. But it only became, once again, a holiday when the Jews received the Torah, and then it actually became something. So we could ask a good question. Sukkot itself only became a historical holiday sometime after it was already a holiday on the calendar. What happened on Shmini Atzeret? What happened on the 22nd of Tishrei? There's nothing there. Just like the seventh day of Passover only became a holiday once, or a holiday in reality. Its potential was only realized once the sea was split. What happened on the 22nd of Tishrei, that should also be a holiday. Once again, we have Chol Hamoed after the first day of Sukkot. Why is the last day, the 8th day, a holiday also? What happened on that specific day? And I like to tell people that the sages describe 5 readings from the prophets that are to be used on over the course of the Sukkot holiday. 2 for the first 2 days of Yom Tov, and 2 for the last 2 days of Yom Tov, and 1 potentially for if there is a Shabbat in the middle, Shabbat Chol Moed. And in the land of Israel, sometimes you only read 2 of those because they don't have 2 less days of Yom Tov, and sometimes that first and last day of Yom Tov are both on the Sabbath. You only get to hear 2 readings. And nowadays, the reading for Shmini Atzeret itself is taken from the book of Joshua right at the beginning, and it is not one that's described in the Talmud at the end of Masechet Megillah that is supposed to be read. The Haftarot describing Sukkot that are prescribed by our sages, 2 involve a future cataclysmic war, usually described as the War of Gog and Magog, and 3 describe the inauguration of the temple in the time of King Solomon. And there's a deep connection there, which we'll talk about sometime later. But suffice it to say that we should be reading about the inauguration of the temple on Sukkot, according to the sages. And there, in Chutz La'aretz, people are aware of this. On the day of Shmini Atzeret, they read about how the conclusion and the climax of the inauguration of the first temple took place when, you guessed it, on Shmini Atzeret. And that is the importance of that day. That's the day when it finally happened. It says that on the 8th of the 7th month, which is a very important day, I know very special people were born on that day. The 8th of the 7th month is when the celebration began. And then we continued for 7 days, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 day of Tishrei. And then another 7-day holiday was conjoined with it because that's always a holiday. And then came the 8th day. Like I said, that's the climax. That's the day when the temple went into full service and the people celebrated, and many miracles, personal miracles happened to people that day. And that is the day of Shmini Atzeret, and that's what we celebrate on Shmini Atzeret. That's why it became that we celebrate with the Torah on that day. That means that for 487 years, according to the Book of Kings, for 487 years, Shmini Atzeret was a day on the Jewish calendar that had not been realized. Its potential, well, of course, in the times, let's say, of the tabernacle at Shiloh, that was fully observed as a holiday, just like it was in the temple in Jerusalem. But it did not have any historical significance yet. It had not happened yet. And we actually see that this concept continues. There's a lot of other holidays. What am I talking about? We'll conclude with this. There are days, the sad days in the Jewish calendar. Hopefully they won't be sad. I keep emphasizing this. I don't want to pick up a printed calendar at the beginning of 5780, which is wishing me a happy and healthy new year, a year of redemption, etc. And then I look in the winter, they're telling me there's going to be a fast day on the 10th of Tevet, or that there's going to be a fast day in the middle of the summer, or 2 fast days commemorating the destruction of the temple. I'm hoping that we will do as the prophet has already told us, that those days are supposed to be holidays. So think about that for 1 minute. Tisha B'Av, Chazal say many things happened on Tisha B'Av, and many things happened on the 17th of Tammuz, or on or about the 17th of Tammuz, on or about Tisha B'Av. See previous shiurim where we discussed this. Many things happened on or about the 10th of Tevet, etc. But the prophet said those are supposed to be holidays. So you see this concept. Many big things happen on Tisha B'Av, and up until now, we have been observing it as a day of mourning, a day of fasting, a day of crying. But in reality, it is supposed to be a holiday, just like Shmini Atzeret is, and we just haven't realized that. We're already have an inkling. We have been told already this little piece of the future. It is going to be a holiday, and so too the 10th of Tevet, the next day on the calendar, the next day on the Jewish calendar, that still has not realized its potential. Same thing with Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tzom Gedalia. These are supposed to be holidays. This concept is nothing new. When we think about it, they also said similar things with regards to Purim. There's ideas behind there. I hope and pray that this year we fully realize the holy potential of every single Sabbath. Every single Saturday is not just a Saturday, it's a holy day. It's a day where we should take as much time as we can to study, avoid all the usual distractions and the newer distractions we keep creating for ourselves in this day and age. We should take time to celebrate every holiday, and we should take the time to hope that through our actions, we could even transform these days that have so far been fast days and realize their potential that's been there since creation, that they also be holidays and day of rejoicing. Have a Shabbat Shalom. And don't forget, like, subscribe, share with your friends, send in your questions, comments. And for those of you who order the book, it's in the mail. So just wait there. Have a good one.